Still recording. Hello again, it's me Chaz back with another video, and this is my 1934 World Cup qualifiers video. So there was a total of 32 teams that were in the qualifying round. Some of them withdrew for whatever reason, and others just didn't flat out qualify. So I looked this up. There's a total of 12 different groups that were split up geographically, and the winner of these different groups will compete at the 1934 World Cup. Some groups were made up of 2 teams, while other groups were made up of 3. And in Group 11's case, which I believe would be the early stages of the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying rounds, there was 3 separate rounds in that, and I'll mention that later on. Uruguay, who declined to compete at the World Cup, in 1934, they would have automatically have qualified for the 1934 World Cup because they were champions. This would be a common thing for every World Cup till the 2006 World Cup, where Brazil would have to have qualified even as the champions of the 2002 World Cup. They would have to qualify. So since 2006 World Cup, even the champions would now have to qualify. But again, for a very long time, the champions didn't have to. Well, because Uruguay declined, the 1934 World Cup was guaranteed a new holder, a new champion. Another thing, Italy, as the hosts, would have had to have qualified. This was the first and only World Cup this would happen. Every World Cup since, the host nation automatically qualified. I think I should mention this as well. Italy being the hosts, they did qualify, but as hosts, this was the very first World Cup they competed in. Similar and obviously like Uruguay, although the 1930 World Cup was the very first World Cup, so then as hosts, they'd be competing anyway for the first time. The only team that's similar to both Uruguay and Italy competing at their very first World Cup, and they happen to be the hosts, is Qatar, who their very first World Cup in 2022 that they hosted, that's the first World Cup they've ever played in. I thought that was quite interesting. Anyway, let's move on to the qualifiers, as mentioned. Quick thing, from Group 1 to Group 8, all of those groups consisted of European nations. There's a total of 21 teams that contested for 12 places. We're going to start on first group, and the first group had Estonia, Lithuania, and Sweden in it. The rules were each team would play each other one time. So a team would have a home game and one away game. Sweden won both of their games against Estonia and Lithuania and qualified for the World Cup in 1934, making their debut. Sweden are one of the founding members of FIFA. They do go on to hosting a World Cup themselves in 1958, which they reached the finals. Both Estonia and Lithuania have never qualified for a World Cup. Group 2, Spain and Portugal were in Group 2 together. Simple one here, both teams would have to play each other home and away. Spain was able to beat Portugal comfortable in the first game, a 9-0 win. Get closer in the second one, a 2-1 win for Spain. But Spain also made their debut, as well as Sweden. They are also a founding member of FIFA and do go on to hosting a World Cup again themselves in 1982, and Spain also eventually do win the World Cup in 2010. Also note, Spain will be hosting or co-hosting the 2030 World Cup with, funny enough, Portugal and Morocco. Right, in Group 3, Italy, as the hosts, they had to qualify. They played Greece and they were able to beat Greece 4-0 in a San Siro. They were going to play Greece again, this time in Greece, but Greece declined to play the second match, and Italy was able to qualify for the World Cup, becoming the first host nation to have to qualify at a World Cup, and the only one. Okay, in Group 4 now, two nations would qualify in this group. There was a total of three nations: Hungary, Austria, and Bulgaria. Hungary and Austria were the two nations that went through in that group. Bulgaria lost all three of their games, twice to Hungary and lost once to Austria, and decided to withdraw. I guess they had no chance of qualifying. All four of these nations do eventually reach the final four, the semi-finals. Austria's done it a number of times, and Bulgaria does it once. Austria, funny enough, does make it to the semi-finals at the 1934 World Cup at this one. Hungary in this group, though, would be the most successful, managing to reach two World Cup finals, first in 1938 against Italy, and then in 1954, this time against West Germany. But Hungary and Austria do move on and they qualify for their first World Cup as well. Group 5 was interesting. Czechoslovakia played Poland. The first game, Czechoslovakia did defeat Poland. In the second game, I had to try and look this up. Poland withdrew, which gave Czechoslovakia a 2-1 or was awarded a 2-0 win. I heard it was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I guess, stopped the team from playing Czechoslovakia in the next game. So Czechoslovakia do qualify for the World Cup for the first time as well, making their debut. Czechoslovakia do go on to reach in the finals of the 1934 World Cup, and they do reach another final afterwards. That would be in 1962. Poland do eventually qualify, and they do reach at least two semi-finals over the years themselves. All right, for me, this is probably the most interesting group. This is Group 6. Group 6 had Romania, Switzerland, and Yugoslavia. Romania and Yugoslavia being two of the original 13, the two European nations, two out of the four European nations, that is, that made the trip to Uruguay. Romania obviously being handpicked by the King, Carol II. I'm not sure who picked the team this time around. I'll try and look into it a bit more. Anyway, Romania was able to top this group. And I guess this will be a shock, a qualifying shock. Yugoslavia, who managed to make it to the semi-finals to become the first European nation to reach the semi-finals, was knocked out. Switzerland was the other team in this group to make it, which meant Switzerland made their debut at the 1934 World Cup in the expense of Yugoslavia. Switzerland, also another founding member of FIFA, and themselves will go on to host in the World Cup. They hosted the 1954 World Cup, which would have been the first World Cup to take place in Europe after World War II. Group 7 had two founder members of FIFA and one of the original 13, that is Belgium, to compete at the World Cup. So Netherlands and Belgium, they were joined by a nation called Irish Free State, who would eventually become the Republic of Ireland, that would be the successor team to them. Both the founding nations of FIFA, Netherlands and Belgium, were the two nations to qualify. Belgium didn't actually win any of their games, but they were able to qualify by goal difference over Irish Free State. The Netherlands would go on to probably being one of the most unluckiest teams or probably the most unlucky nation in the World Cup history, losing three finals, two of them back to back. The 1974 final against West Germany, with West Germany were the host, and the 1978 final against Argentina, where Argentina were the hosts. And most recently, they were defeated in 2010 by Spain in South Africa. Belgium themselves have reached two semi-finals. The most recent one would have been, is the 2018 World Cup semi-final where they were defeated by France in Russia. Both Netherlands and Belgium do co-host a Euros. They co-hosted the 2000 Euros 2000, but both nations haven't hosted a World Cup, unlike the other four nations who founded FIFA: Netherlands, Belgium, and Denmark, the only founding nations yet to host a World Cup. And Group 8, speaking of a founding nation, France, who competed at the very first match at the World Cup, or one of the first matches against Mexico. They were in the same group as Germany and Luxembourg. All three nations were to play each other one time. Both Germany and France defeated Luxembourg in Luxembourg. And because Luxembourg lost their two games, both France and Germany didn't have to play each other, and they qualified for the World Cup. Germany debuting for the first time, and France entering another World Cup. Again, one of the original 13. France go on to host in the next World Cup after this, the 1938 World Cup. And again, they would host the World Cup again in 1998, which they won for the very first time. And then 20 years from then, from 98, they would go on to win a World Cup for a second time in 2018 in Russia. Germany, on the other hand, would win the World Cup for the first time as West Germany in 1954, where they defeated Hungary. They would then go on to win another 3 World Cups and host 2 World Cups, first as West Germany in 1974, where they defeated the Netherlands, and then will go on to host in the World Cup as a unified Germany in 2006. Germany has reached the most finals out of any other nation at the World Cup, competing in 8 finals. Right, the next 2 groups now are going to involve nations from the CONMEBOL. So this will probably be the early stages of the CONMEBOL World Cup qualifiers. CONMEBOL are nations from the South America. Brazil were in a group with Peru, but Peru withdrew from the World Cup, which meant Brazil qualified automatically. And the same thing happened in Group 10 with Argentina and Chile. Chile withdrew, and Argentina was able to qualify again automatically. So that's how the 2 nations from South America was able to compete at the 1934 World Cup without having to play a match. Now, Group 11, which I guess would be the early stages of the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers, was probably the most unique out of all the groups. The first round had Cuba play Haiti. 3 different times Cuba and Haiti played each other. From the 28th of January 1934, the 1st of February 1934, and the 4th of February 1944. So 3 times they had to play each other. Cuba won 2 out of the 3 times they played. The first game beating Haiti 3-1, and the final game beating Haiti 6-0. They did draw against Haiti in the second game, a 1-1 draw. All matches were played in Haiti, so Cuba was able to advance. And in the second round, now Cuba would take on one of the original 13 nations, that is Mexico. Again, this time they had to play each other 3 different occasions. Again, just like with Haiti and Cuba, this time round, though, Mexico was the ones that won the game. All 3 games was played in Mexico. Mexico won the first one 3-2, second one 5-0, and finally defeated Cuba for the last time 4-1, and that meant Mexico would advance. America came up against Mexico this time around. Both teams were in Italy to compete. Whoever lost this game would go back home straight away. I guess because the USA submitted their entry a bit too late. That's why. I'm not really sure why Mexico again had to compete in another match, but they did. This time it was a straight up one-off match. The USA was able to defeat Mexico 4-2. And this is a game against the two nations that did represent the CONCACAF North America at the very first World Cup. USA doing a lot better than Mexico at that one. Obviously, USA reaching the semi-finals when Mexico, on the other hand, was knocked out, and I believe the first nation to get knocked out of a World Cup. And this is how the USA was able to qualify, becoming the lone nation from the CONCACAF to compete at the World Cup. So that's the three American teams, two from the South and one from North America. Now the final group, Group 12. I guess Group 12 was a bit unique. It didn't have... So the three nations that were in this group were kind of close to each other. And these days, two of them play now in Europe, while one of them's obviously still in Africa, and that's Egypt. So Egypt was the nation that was able to qualify in Group 12. They joined Turkey. Turkey actually withdrew. And the other team was Palestine British Mandate. Now, this nation, or this team, would eventually become the team we know now as Israel. So the current Palestine team, aren't the successors of this team, would be more like the current Israel team is the successor of this team. And I'm really not trying to touch that. But anyway, Egypt were able to beat Palestine's British Mandate 7-1 and then 4-1. First game was played in Egypt, in Cairo, and the second game was played in that area, that region. I think the grounds was called Palms Ground. I can't find any pictures of either of these grounds, by the way, because the ground of Egypt, where I look on Wikipedia, says the British Army ground. I'm not finding any pictures. It's very hard to find something here, images on like the other stadiums. But yeah, with those two wins for Egypt, Egypt was able to qualify, becoming the very first nation from Africa to compete at the World Cup in 1934. And that's how all 16 nations, the new batch, qualified for the 1934 World Cup. My next video will be about how Italy got the 1934 World Cup, and I'll mention all the matches and how it worked then. And of course, I have to mention Mussolini as well, who wanted the 1934 World Cup for Italy. So I'll discuss all of that. It's going to be similar to my 1930 World Cup video, which I'll try and put a link down here. I'll go into more detail. Anyway, thanks for watching, listening. I appreciate it as always. And once again, bye.